this year's Turner Prize. For the first time, the nominees are made up of collectives, which the organisers say have helped to inspire social change through art.
Hi everyone, we are Young H and Heavy Industries.
Thanks for tuning in today as we answer the burning question.
What is an art collective?
There is within, I think, many different societies an idea of like the artist as somehow genius or somehow separate from the rest of society. But I feel that what's important is actually to recognise the artist as part of society.
I think that the term collective is really helpful when we're sort of describing how we want to reverse the traditional power dynamics. I think that the word collective is really a nod to that idea of
equity.
Equity, exactly.
We're the kind of people who you wouldn't expect to be an art collective. If they're expecting us to call ourselves Art Boys with a Z, then we'll put it in there. We'll put the Z in.
We'll put the Z in. The thing is, we've always worked together or been around each other because it's a family first. It was always that first, and then it kind of developed into, hold up, we're doing a lot of things together. We need to make this kind of like a collective and work more under one umbrella.
We met in London back in 2013 and we started working together, developed a collaborative platform, and through that also started working with so many other people, different disciplines, and from marine biology to botanics, agronomy, etc.
The act of working collaboratively is also kind of generating the space that can bring many forms of expertise to the table, because we do not have all of the expertise it takes.
Or the answers.
Or the answers, yeah, to kind of tackle these questions.
We all felt a shared experience that our heritage and our positionality wasn't really represented so much in the art world around us. When there's collective energy involved, there's actually more momentum to change things, especially where equitable representation in the art world is concerned. So I think that the main aim is always to uplift each other.
Any vision I've ever had has been actualized, but also been elevated by working with these two and working with other people. And I think when you're working with your brothers, it's like you're just confident.
The vision was for an egalitarian collective, and it was there right from the beginning.
Amber had this kind of principle that's often talked about of, you know, the person that paints the door chooses the colour, and I think there was a real respect for individual craft. So like if you were the camera person or if you were the editor, you were given incredible freedom to make those decisions.
I recognise, you know, the role of like individual artists. I think what's really brilliant when we think about like collectives or collaborations or socially engaged practice is to recognise an artistic practice which is dialogic.
We're in dialogue with our influences in the past, we're in dialogue with the work we've made in the past, we're in dialogue with the work that each other is making, and hopefully other people then dialogue with us, dialogue through us. And that's kind of the intention, really.
A lot of different people bring a lot of different skills, and it is through that sort of merging of different people's experiences, different people's perspectives, different people's abilities and talents that we're able to create everything that we do create. So the individual within that is really, really special and important.
You have your own drive. Obviously, you come here because of the vision that you share, but you're not expected to give up yourself in order to merge into some sort of a collective part.
One of the biggest benefits of being in a collective is like, as much as Anaya was saying that you're doing the design and the colour palettes and I'm doing the visuals. I'm actually just learning from both of them all the time.
It's a very particular kind of character, I think, that can work in a collective. You have to have a certain kind of degree of confidence in your own identity, but you also have to not have a big ego.
Why make art together?
Why be an art collective? As opposed to making it alone, you always have someone to tell that you're an artistic genius.
And since you're all on the same team,
That someone seconds are you.
it makes for a joyous collective.
It's not just that when you come together with other people that you're automatically a collective. I think there's definitely the processes of going through the agreements and the disagreements and feeling those tensions, but the commonality being that you feel that there's a benefit of a collective practice.
I think there are all different reasons why people get together and work collectively. The whole reason for being involved in those communities, those of us who recognised aspects of life that we found important to celebrate. That way of celebrating working class communities was very important for us.
We were there for the long haul and people knew that, and we were there during the miners' strike. We made films there, and people will come to us now if they have something that they think needs to be made a film about. They come to us to ask us if we're interested to do it. And I think that in that sense there is a collective, there is a wider collective.
Before we go further, we wonder,
Aren't we explaining this art collective thing ass backwards?
yeah, why start and stop with the question of art collectives?
Why give you our take on what an art collective is before giving you the prequel?
Yeah, how about a little context?
For me, it would be hard to say whether there are less collectives or more collectives than have operated previously. There have been artistic collectives from, if I think about the different movements and the way in which art, let's say, traditionally is understood through collective movement. So signing up maybe to an artistic manifesto of this is what we believe art can do in the world.
It's nothing new. There's been a long trajectory of these kinds of work, collectives or collaborative platforms that have been going on for like decades or even centuries, or is at the very base of humanity, if you want. Like, we've always lived together.
I feel that also sometimes collective activity can be invisible activity, and it's not always documented or recorded, and that they can come and go as well as the need sees fit, I think.
There was definitely more understanding of collectives and cooperatives and different ways of working in the 70s and 80s. And I think it became unfashionable. Post-Thatcher, the kind of rise of yuppiedom and people having to sell, I mean, partly just to survive, people had to sell their individual practice.
If you're not in the rat race, you almost feel like you're not in the scene. There's almost like a pressure to be like constantly presenting work or constantly telling people that you're working, or even constantly being out at events and doing social things, when really, as an artist, there's a million and one things to be done at home in your studio.
It is challenging to do all of these projects without funding. Essentially, for us to grow and build and make this reach more people and do more good, there is a reality to the fact that you do need money to do that.
We pooled all the income, so whatever we were doing, however well paid we may be for certain jobs, everything went into the pot. I think the first wage we had was £8 a week. You could live perfectly well on £8 a week in those days.
But I think even when we had the best years in terms of funding, like with Channel 4, we would always overextend ourselves. We would take on more and bigger projects and do them for less. And, you know, I think that self-exploitation is one of the common problems in collectives.
As a collective, we want to work with each other, but sometimes we don't have the funds to do that. And so we have to do a lot of individual work, which we'll bring each other in on, to allow ourselves to do stuff which we can do together. Yeah. Like, you're trying to learn new things, you're trying to make new things, and you're trying to work with your brothers and
also survive.
Yeah.
The
last sort of 18 months has really profiled and sort of raised the profile of care and this idea of community and people looking after each other, which I think is really important. I think that's a very big motivator for artists and different groups.
I think we need to remember that, like, as humans, we haven't achieved much on our own, but much more through collaboration and kind of setting up frameworks and societies that enabled kind of big movements to happen throughout history.
I believe in humanity's capacity for change. Almost like weirdly, it's kind of grown in the last few years, despite everything happening around me. You look at the world that we are within arm's distance from being in, and you look at where we are, and it does take people being bold to say, actually, this is what I believe. This is what I see. This is what I feel. Hopefully it can spark a conversation where we decide that actually we're stronger together, and let's try and make a world where we all have a place in it.
Stronger together.
Exactly.
We thought that we would probably just fade out. Once the kind of old guard were gone, then it would fade away because there wasn't anyone coming along in the next generations that were interested. But now it's very different because there is definitely that interest.
The work of the collective, I think, is never really done, because it could be the case that you have a collective that kind of comes together, you know, finds the impetus and the energy to work together, to produce things together. But it feels as if there is a kind of lifespan. And so where one collective might disband and go on to do other things, and that happens for many different reasons, you often find another collective emerging.
Many times we are working in things and then you realize how much input you are getting from other people, other things around you. So it's also interesting to think, like, maybe you are already a collective without knowing it or without realizing.